Labas rytas, netrukus pradėsime konferenciją, kviečiu visus užimti vietas salėje, geriančius kavą, taip pat ateiti į konferencijos erdvę, pradėsime po kelių minučių. Labas rytas, ponios ir ponai, kviečiu visus užimti vietas salėje. Sveikinu visus atvykus į Europos komisijos atstovybės Lietuvoje ir Lietuvos Respublikos finansų ministerijos organizuojamą metinę konferenciją skirtą ES ekonomikos gaivinimo plano įgyvendinimui Lietuvoje, žaliosios pertvarkos ir Lietuvos inovacijų potencialo skatinimas. Konferencijoje dalyvauja Lietuvos institucijų atstovai, taip pat Europos komisijos atstovai. Šiandien turėsime keletą svarbių pranešimų, taip pat keletą diskusijų. Renginio metu bus naudojama slaido programėlė.
I would like to encourage you to open it in your browser to be able to use it for asking your questions to the panelists. And before that, I would like to invite the head of the European Commission representation in Lithuania, Mr. Marius Vaščega, to say a welcoming word.
Labas rytas,
Good morning.
Ačiū už tokį gausų ir didelį dėmesį.
Thank you very much for such a huge interest shown to the RRF, which is called the Next Generation EU, and to the conference dedicated to its implementation. It is being organized by the Representation Office of the European Commission together with the Ministry of Finance of Lithuania. And therefore, I'm very happy to see many representatives from employers, employees, experts, and officers from the European Commission bodies. And today's event is dedicated to review the facility, which is, by the way, enormous, on unprecedented scale, on the EU scale, and that is the Next Generation Europe, and it is economic recovery facility of 800 billion euros. In it, Lithuania has an allocation of 3.85 billion. This amount, however modest it may look like, it corresponds to 5% of the Lithuanian GDP. And I think that everybody is going to agree with that this is quite a significant amount, especially in such a turbulent economic and political times. Allow me to remind you that this instrument was introduced to allow European economies to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And let us remember, and by the way, it is good that we tend to forget such causes. And 4 years ago, the life was at a standstill, and it took a while for us to get back on our feet. At that time, we were fearing that national economies, were not going to do it on their own. They needed some help. We understood that we need joint decisions because in Europe, everything is based on solidarity, and in difficult times, solidarity calls for our joint concerted effort. Within the EU, we are dependent on each other, just as it is within a family, and we help each other to address the challenges. So if we're helping one member state to address their challenges, in this way we're helping each other, and then we help the entire EU. And of course, it is also important to remember that this joint response helps to seek joint agenda, and it is for that reason that we have a significant attention given to the green and digital transformation, which are the tools for ensuring long-term competitiveness. How does this the Next Generation EU facility works? It is based on the fact that the European Commission is funding it by way of extending loans and grants and bonds taken on behalf of the EU. In this way, this is a common EU commitment. And whenever we are talking about a common commitment, there is always a wish for this joint commitment to be ensured by the reforms and investments made by the states, which are meant to boost the long-term competitive edge of the member states, and in so doing, contribute to the overall EU agenda. Next Gen Europe is also in after 3 years of the start of this plan, we already see the first results of the investments made. We have charging stations for e-vehicles, there are some modern renovation of buildings, and there are competence centers are being established where businesses and academia join their efforts. These investments cover the most important walks of life of the state. Today's event is focusing on two topics, and that is energetic independence and modernization of businesses. Why is it so? Because these two topics are the best ones, illustrating that EU does care for the success of Lithuania. And Lithuania is going to be successful if it is energetically independent, that it cannot be blackmailed by energy used as a weapon. And a key to energy independence is green transformation and green energy. Green transition, and we can introduce and we can install the solar panels in the fields or on our rooftops. And Lithuania, by the way, is quite ambitious, and we will try to do this, and we will try to uncover in the first part of the conference what steps are being taken to make it happen. In the long term, Lithuania is going to ensure economic well-being of its population, and high-tech businesses is the foundations of a successful business. High-value added industries pay higher salaries and higher taxes into the budget, and therefore we have to put all the conditions in place to allow businesses to modernize themselves, and therefore all the skills that are necessary for future economies are going to be the topics of our second panel discussion. In these two areas, EU provides a lot of opportunities to Lithuania. After next-gen Lithuania plan amendment of last year, we introduced new facilities for green transition and digital transformation, and it is our goal to make the best use of the finances allocated to this end. I would like to wish everybody successful and fruitful discussions during the conference and after the conference. Let us all discuss what challenges do we see in the investments that are being made in Lithuania, and find the ways of tackling all the obstacles on the way. We have to implement this plan that we have foreseen. And by the way, there is not that much time left before the end of the facility. 2 years and 2 months, and we have to make the best use of the time left. And to finish off my opening address, I would like to quote, and that is a quote from the previous event 2 years ago, which continue to be relevant. Next-gen Lithuania plan is not a commitment of Lithuania towards the EU institutions. This plan is our joint commitment to generations to come, and we have to deliver. Thank you very much, and have a fruitful discussion.
Dėkoju Europos komisijos atstovybės Lietuvoje vadovui. Dabar dėmesį į ekraną. Kviečiu visus išklausyti Europos komisijos pirmininkės vykdomojo pavaduotojo Valdžio Dombrovskio.
The speech of the Executive Vice President of European Commission, Valdis
Labadiena
Dombrovskis.
visiems. Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to speak to you at Lithuania's second annual conference of its Recovery and Resilience Plan. A little history to begin with. When Europe was hit by COVID-19 pandemic and we agreed on the 800 billion euros Next Generation EU Recovery Plan, we chose to focus its support on several crucial areas. Along with improving our health and well-being, Next Generation EU focuses on promoting innovation, investments and quality jobs, as well as green and digital transitions. Our transition to green energy became even more important after Russia started its war of aggression against Ukraine and weaponized its energy exports against EU countries. Europe's response was to develop Repower EU initiative as a way to bolster our energy security. In the Baltics, this approach was very welcome, also given the spike in energy prices in 2022. The green and digital transitions are vital for our future, for securing the competitiveness of EU economy and ensuring high living standards for generations to come. We also need to have the right environment for workers and businesses to prosper. That means having proper access to finance, efficient administrations, adequate infrastructure, as well as opportunities for workers to upskill and reskill. And this is the point of the Next Generation EU. Its centerpiece instrument, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, is a main vehicle for member states to carry out the reforms and investments needed to address long-standing economic and social challenges. Lithuania has already achieved a lot in implementing its Recovery and Resilience Plan, New Generation Lithuania. In terms of grants and loans, it has now received 1.3 billion euros, equivalent to 34% of its total available. For the first two payments, Lithuania carried out reforms to promote electricity production from renewable energy sources and electric charging infrastructure, to speed up the 5G rollout and digitalization of public services, to increase efficiency of public procurement, to boost access to green finance and research and innovation support, to improve vocational education and training, and the provision of social services, among others. Lithuania has backed up these reforms with investments. For example, the 4 energy storage facilities in the regions of Vilnius, Utena, Šiauliai, and Alytus. Already operational, they will allow for easier disconnection from the Russian grid next year. This shows that even large projects can be completed promptly and contribute towards the strategic goals of the entire region. Lithuania should keep building on this success. However, since all investments and reforms must be in place by the end of August 2026, Lithuania needs to accelerate implementation of its plan. This is true for many other member states as well. Lithuania has still 10 installments and 180 milestones and targets ahead, and only 2.5 years to complete the task. Several important legislative milestones are pending, such as the tax reform. This reform should bring simplification and more fairness, while increasing the role of taxes that are less detrimental to growth. It becomes even more crucial given the need to ensure sustainable funding for defense, education, healthcare, and other areas. Other reforms that are upcoming in Lithuania include providing better protection for unemployed and more adequate social protection, incentivizing consolidation in the higher education sector, and improving coordination of public transport. National ownership of each plan is essential for the Recovery and Resilience Facility to be carried out successfully and bring lasting benefits for each member state. For all member states, the RRF is a unique opportunity to invest in the future, to increase competitiveness, social and economic convergence, and growth. It will play a key part in strengthening our collective resilience. So, your event today and others like this are held across Europe is very important. It gathers national and local authorities, social partners, civil society, businesses of all sizes, financial institutions, and academia. All of you play an important role for the successful delivery of Lithuania's recovery plan. I would like to thank you for your hard work and dedication. Congratulations to Lithuania, its government and people on all the progress made so far. Tikiuosi artimoje ateityje pamatyti visiškai įgyvendintą Naujos Kartos Lietuva planą. Ačiū.
Dar kartą primenu, kad galite atsidaryti.
Allow me to remind you that you can open slide.do and you can raise the questions to the panelists, and the hashtag is RRF. So just open the app Slido and use hashtag RRF, where you can raise the questions to the panelists. And now I would like to invite for the keynote address Ms. Gintarė Skaistė, Minister of Finance of the Republic of Lithuania.
Labadiena visiems, aš kaip ir Valdis Dombrovskis tikiuosi
Good day to everybody. Just as Valdis Dombrovskis, I do expect to see the New Generation Lithuania plan fully implemented, because it is a way as a child, even though sometimes you forget to take the rubbish out, it is still the most beloved one, and you put all your love into it. So New Generation Lithuania is my child. And this plan was being prepared at the time when our government was preparing and drafting its future program for 4 years. So we needed the source and a sort of incentives, and this is what we did. And the new Generation Lithuania plan is a direct embodiment of our political commitments that we undertook by way of coming to the realm of the state. And I'm very happy of the decisions made, and I do expect them to be implemented in time. And today, I'm standing in front of you in order to rejoice over the success that we have achieved so far. So let us start from the beginning. So what does this Next Generation EU, and why do we have this facility on the European arena? Back then, we had COVID-19 pandemic challenges, and many member states were severely affected. The economies were at a standstill. Many businesses were shut down, especially the southern member states whose economies are deeply dependent on tourism. Lithuania had challenges of its own, and therefore this facility, Next Generation EU facility, was made with a size-fits-all principle that whoever needs some economic incentivization to help the economies to recover, they could benefit from this. So Lithuania had to benefit from increasing its resilience in public care and other social care services. So starting from, of course, now I'm reviewing back in history, back in the time, a couple of months just before the election, I remember my electoral video where I said that the European Commission has been recommending for many times to Lithuania, and there are some deep-rooted systemic problems because everybody seems to be unwilling to take unpopular yet very important decisions. And as soon as you come to power, nobody deals with these problems, despite the fact that everybody is aware they need to be tackled. And I believed strongly that Lithuania could be stronger and that I could contribute. And I believe that was one of the ways of being involved in a New Generation Lithuania plan, by way of envisaging the reforms and the investments for Lithuania. And I very much hope that this plan is going to be implemented by 2026. So what were the three major directions? The economic transformation, which is the green transition, and digital transformation. So at least 37% of the overall plan funds, and for digitalization, at least 20% had to be allocated. So when it comes to digitalization, Lithuania is well advanced, despite, of course, there is always room for improvement. Long-term structural reforms that hinder further progress, and by the way, they're more emotionally charged, and they touch a lot of people. And COVID-19 pandemic and the problems that it has uncovered. And we have developed our plan, drafted our plan, and submitted it to the European Commission. Then the Russian invasion to the Ukraine struck, and we saw that our energy sector is very much highly dependent on the imports, and be it Russian oil or gas or electricity, despite the fact that we had some options available. We were still dependent on the Russian gas. So if the energy sector could be vulnerable by way of restricting the demand, the supply, Lithuania could also be at risk of huge dependence. What could we do on our part? If Lithuania or other member states do not have any natural oil resources, but still we have wind, we have sun, maybe we should empower and we should harness these energies to reach our independence. And this is what we did. We included it into the New Generation Lithuania plan. Along with the energy challenges, there were new challenges such as high inflation, slowdown in economical slowdown, and therefore we decided to update our plan with a new set of measures to help businesses, to help them becoming more advanced, offering high-end services, investing into renewable resources. And all these decisions are very important. And the third part where businesses could invest into, which also presents challenges of its own, is investments into defense industry. The Russian Russian war of aggression in Ukraine allowed us, opened our eyes, and we believe that we saw it, that we need to invest much more in our national defense industry. So that was the path that we took, and all these priorities were changing a little bit along the way. So initially, we had a group of experts which highlighted three main priorities. Some priorities were universal, European priorities. In Lithuania, we saw green transition, digital transformation, education. We believe that these are the areas which would benefit from much higher investments. And after the Russian invasion to Ukraine, energy independence and high-end industry were added into our list of priorities. Now allow me to go and to discuss them each one by one. Green transition. There are many myths surrounding this initiative. In Lithuania, we have a much better situation because for us, green transition also stands for energy independence. At the same time, green transition covers many much broader agenda, such as our commitments with regard to the climate change mitigation. So we have increased our energy independence from a green transitional point of view is by 30%, and it is one of the most ambitious goals, and we need to put an extra effort to achieve this. For that, we planned our regulatory changes. And what makes this plan exceptional, or what makes it different from the structural funds, is that first you have to come forward with a plan of reforms and those regulatory decisions that you need to take, which needs to back up which needs to be backed up by the investments. So starting from the regulatory framework changes, only then the investments will come. So this is how we launched the Center of Excellence for the renovation of buildings, anything that is related to the renovation projects. We also adopted the action plan for the green finances, and we do understand that public funding may not be enough to cover all the needs. Private investments have to reinforce the public investments, and to make this happen so that businesses could have access to finances, we now have a Green Finances Institute, which works on a principle of one-stop shop, helps to submit your applications to get the necessary funding, and it is also a partner for financial institutions which want to increase the green portfolio in the overall credit portfolio. So I think that this is going to help us achieve the main goals, because we do have enormous amounts of funding allocated to this end. When it comes to renewable energy resources, I'm going to speak about them later. And then production of fuel from renewables, there are already projects ongoing. Hydrogen, production of hydrogen, bioethane, and biogases, so they are already ongoing. And this is a process which is indeed very much, when it comes to renovation, this is very much investment intensive. And of course, to upgrade the energy efficiency class, a lot of effort and a lot of funding is needed. So the new Generation Lithuania plan contributes to the renovation processes, of which roughly 700 multi-residential buildings have to be renovated by 2026. We're also organizing instruments with the new generation. So New Generation Lithuania plan is only one of the sources. Sustainable transport stands for acquisition of public transport, which would be with zero emissions. And we can have many electric cars, but if we do not have any charging stations, then it's pointless. So charging stations have to be also put in place. And therefore, the development of the network of the charging stations are expected to have roughly 60,000 new charging stations by 2026. The second priority would be digital transformation, and this is the word which somehow an umbrella term, but sometimes it's very difficult to say what is behind it. These processes have a very huge impact on our daily lives. This priority, 473 million euros have been allocated. We already have adopted the laws on making the finances, on the availability of access to data, and we are encouraging the recycling of data, also using the data for business innovations, which is also necessary, because businesses can develop many more advanced products provided they get access to big data. When it comes to the integration of data into the data lake, data pool, and also customer-oriented electronic services. In the past, we had many services which were hard copy-based, but now we're more or less moving towards the paperless public services. So Lithuania, by the way, is one among the few member states which is most seriously advanced in this area. Roughly 50 plus projects are being implemented in this area. Innovative projects in businesses. Businesses also need some stimulus and some finances in order to install the AI technologies or blockchain technologies, as well as G5 rollout for various public transportation area. Roughly 200 of such innovative projects are being implemented in the digitalization, digital transformation. And the third area, the most problematic one, is education. We always believe that there is something that needs to be done very much in the educational area. I remember in my pre-electoral speech where I said that we need to invest in the education area from the early age, from the kindergarten age, to improve the access to kindergarten, to childcare services, as well as general education. Access to the general education has to be improved. Then educational attainment of students has to be improved. All these elements are intertwined, because if you're only going to focus on the higher education and you disregard all the earlier stages of education, the result is not going to be any different. And the simplest example of that is as follows. You can compare the data in the member states where attendance at kindergartens is of a much higher level, then the long-term educational attainment of students is much better, even though at first sight it may not look something related like kindergarten and achievement at a school age, but, well, statistics say paints a different picture. So the new Generation Lithuania plan, despite the fact that there are additional sources which also contribute to the evolution within the educational sector, is, by the way, some portion of all the effort that is being taken in the educational field. And the legislative amendments have been made that are necessary. We have improved the millennial school project. We are having all the plans that have already been drafted for modernizing our educational system. We also have the National Vocational Training Progress Platform. We also have a lifelong learning model which is being implemented, and the most well-known project is the Millennium School schools that is being involving all the municipalities. It is well advanced in its progress. 270 schools is indeed a huge number of schools which contribute to the success of the plan. But of course, the regulatory framework and all the documentary changes have been made. Contribute to the success. Vocational training has been mentioned by the European Commission and by any other major international institutions as a major mismatch, namely a mismatch between the skills that the Lithuanian population have and the skills that are required on the labor market. And in order to do this better, to make this balance better, we do need to reform our vocational training programs, apprenticeship programs, as well as learning on the basis of vocational training. 4,000 of pupils from general schools will benefit from apprenticeship programs in the sectoral vocational training centers. So anybody willing will be able to gain the necessary experience. And I could also mention a number of other projects which could contribute to making a better match between the skills available and the skills needed on the labor market. And the lifelong learning principle, on this slide you see our ambitions that within the 4 last weeks there should be 15% of all adults learning on the principle of lifelong learning principle. I'm the one who likes to always to touch base with the starting point and what we have now at the moment. So before we launched this plan, the indicator was 7.5% of all the adults on the lifelong learning training programs within the last 4 weeks. That is, the results of the polls. So you see there is double the rate that we have achieved so far.
Energy independence is probably one of the most important priorities of the plan, at least to me personally, because it reflects the very recent changes during our term when Russia invaded Ukraine, and that had a huge impact to the energy sector. I still remember the discussions taking place before the energy shocks. We were talking to energy experts who said that the Russians would never dare, because their energy sector is very interdependent to the others. It's in the same chain. And when we saw that they did dare, and dared quite much, we realized that we do not want to be hooked on this dependence, so we had to invest in the renewables. And we are very close, and our energy consumption structure is still very dependent on fossil fuels, and we're very proud to be the first country that refused to buy Russia's fossil fuels. But at the same time, we're among the countries that are still very dependent on fossil fuels. 3/4 of our energy needs in Lithuania are satisfied by imports, and in order to change the situation and to keep the billions in Lithuania, I believe that renewable energy is the strategy that is closely linked to our energy costs and also is key to our country's, our state's survival and security. So all the regulatory acts have been adopted in the parliament as well. The breakthrough package has been adopted. It approves the access to businesses to the investments into renewable energy. And now we see very big advances in renewable infrastructure development. So in order to be able to switch to 100% of renewables in energy generation, we have to assess the technical parameters. So we have financed LT100 study from the Next Gen Lithuania, and here we will find out how to ensure 100% of renewables to produce electricity. So we can speak here about two parts, the production from renewable energy and also energy generation, and also the accumulation and storage of energy. And Mr. Dombrovskis mentioned the 200-megawatt system. And now we're investing into new facilities, and now we are evaluating 114 applications that were received. And all of this will help us balance the renewable infrastructure. We have also published calls for applications for loans and subsidies. In this facility, we hope to be able to generate 185 megawatts of electricity, and our institution in Vega helps the businesses to obtain favorable loans in order to invest into the renewables area and to ensure the long-term economy resilience. The last priority is the high added value industry.
buvo patvirtintos, jeigu kalbant apie reguliavimą,
In terms of regulation, the guidelines for the defense industry and development guidelines for 23-27 were approved, as well as the institutional reform in Lithuania. And I personally am very happy and proud of this reform because the previous government did not succeed in this, despite of the fact that it had been included in the governmental program. So the reform took place during our term. It has a big impact because 4 national development agencies were consolidated. They were working with the businesses in different sectors. Today, this has become one big national development agency. Its name is Invega. We have plans to rebrand it and to introduce it as a very strong Lithuanian business partner. It includes a lot of strong business-oriented measures because investments alone will not help us. We have to ensure other financing as well. So we have a new facility. It's called $1 billion for business. It consists of several parts. 850 million dedicated to the loans to companies who are wishing to invest into a higher added value. Also clean technologies, renewable energy, energy efficiency, as well as the defense industry. The National Development Agency has received increased capital, 150 million, in order to make sure that the institution is more independent in taking decisions and also to initiate new financial measures. In other words, to have more muscle to help the Lithuanian businesses to grow and improve. So these are our priorities, and as I said, this is our very dear child that we are leading along the way and helping it grow. So in terms of financing, the overall plan of the subsidy and loan plan amounts to 3.8 billion. And currently, since the plan consists of regulatory decisions, legal acts and investments, so currently at the regulatory level, we have adopted three-quarters of the necessary decisions in order to pave way for the investments. And we have published the calls for 95% of the entire scope of the plan. We have concluded contracts for 84%. That means that we are already in the stage when everything is gaining momentum and the investments are coming into the economy. Now, turning to the indicators that we have to account for. So currently, the completeness level is 35%. Mr. Dombrovskis also mentioned that. We have 65 of the reachable targets to be reached. Milestones, and Lithuania is among the countries that are very successful in absorbing EU investments. It is probably in our nature to take when we are given. So I believe that this plan will be no exception, and it will be implemented successfully. So as I said, 3/4 of the reforms have been approved, and now we are entering the investment stage. I believe that this plan is our joint responsibility and the common asset of all Lithuanian citizens, so I encourage all of you to do your best to make sure that this plan is implemented on time, because it will give a big impetus to the Lithuanian economy and will help strengthen the resilience of the Lithuanian economy and help it be transformed in order for Lithuania to become a safe and prosperous country. And I believe that this plan is an excellent tool to achieve all this. Thank you. Thank you to the Minister of Finance, Gintarė Skaistė. Please, Minister, join the discussion already now. We are going to start it in a moment. Boosting green transition and energy security in Lithuania. And I'd like to introduce the participants of the discussion, the Minister, as well as the Director General of the European Commission Recovery Task Force, Celine Gaur. Please take your seat in the panel, as well as the President of the Lithuanian Solar Energy Association, Mr. Andrius Karazinas. Andrius, please take your seat, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of Litgrid, Rokas Masiulis. Let me remind you that you can open the Slido app, and there is a hashtag RRR, and you can read the others' questions or ask your question, and also put a like on the question that you like most, and I will ask the questions that will collect the most likes, because those will turn out to be the most relevant questions to this community. So, Minister, let us begin with you. Lithuania, as you've mentioned, has done a lot in the area of renewable energy in the past years. More than 50% of electricity is now generated from renewable energy sources. But of course, our ambitions are even higher. Could it be so that, say, in 10 years, Lithuania would become a significant electricity exporter in the EU? Currently, we are renewing the national energy strategy, and it contains ambitions, plans, and objectives. So our ambition is that in 2030, 100% of electricity consumed in Lithuania would be generated from renewable energy sources. It is quite natural that despite the growing use of electricity, we hope that the generation will grow faster than the consumption, and Lithuania will become an exporter of electricity. We have this in our strategy. We have foreseen all the objectives, and we are implementing them successfully. And in 2027, we expect to see 100% of electricity necessary for Lithuania will be generated in Lithuania itself, thanks mostly to the solar and wind energy development. And in 2030, according to the plan, 100% of electricity will have to be generated from those sources. The war in Ukraine demonstrated that decisions need to be made and made fast. I believe that Lithuania could serve as an example to other countries in terms of achieving these goals. Mrs. Gower, what do you think about Lithuania's achievements in terms of renewable energy and energy security?
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Well, I think here we have, and thanks to the plan, the twin objectives of energy independence and decarbonization of the economy that reach the same objective. So you have Lithuania was starting from relatively far below the EU average, both on energy independence and on the renewables in the energy mix. But here, thanks to the recovery plan, but also as a reaction and very immediate and very robust reaction to the aggression of Ukraine by Russia, we see a huge acceleration. So an increase in renewable capacity by 59% in just a year is extremely impressive. And the other thing I think that is particularly relevant is the increase in storage, because renewables is extremely good. This is clean and this is local. But of course, as this is intermittent, you need to have storage to back it up. And the speed at which Lithuania has put up this 200 megawatt storage capacity financed by the plan, I think, is an example for many other member states. So overall, a very, very strong reaction, very quick and very effective to reach both energy independence and decarbonization. So very positive.
Thank you very much for your reply. Mr. Karazinas, renewables or production from renewables is not simply growing, it is skyrocketing. It's making the very huge steps forward. So my question is, to what extent can we still further develop this sector? Where is the limit of renewables sector? Personally, myself, I have seen presentations made by companies such as our Ignitis, which has a very ambitious goal of replacing 1/4 of pre-war levels of energy exports into Germany just with the help of Lithuania by 2035. To me, it sounds like a super ambitious goal. So do you think where is the limit, or the sky is the limit for the further development? That is my first question. And how important the RRF funds are important in this? Good morning to everybody. Well, not by tens of percentage points, but by 100%. Last year, prosumers, the level of prosumers increased by 8%. And now we have a 1.5 gigawatt surplus. So it is quite realistic that by the end of the year, we're going to have a growth by 100%. So from 80% now to 100%. So we have very good indications that it is possible. We have now 100,000 of prosumers, producing consumers, and they are producing more energy than they can use themselves. And therefore, is sky the limit? I think we have to look at the overall context. Where do we stand compared to our neighbors who are also developing their renewable sectors? And I believe this is a race, and we shall not be lagging behind in this race. We shall be ambitious. If we're lagging behind, then maybe the time will be no longer viable to develop your renewable infrastructure because it will be cheaper to buy it from other countries, to import it. So what are the contributing factors for this sectoral growth? We have to understand that all the investments, especially that portion of private investments, is just one of investment alternatives. And I think that if we want to attract investments into the area of renewables, we have to make all the efforts in order to decrease all the associated risks. And of course, RRF funds is one of such measures, allowing us to shorten the payback period and making those investments much more lucrative and much more beneficial. Thank you for your answer. I see that we have received quite a lot of questions on the slide, but I would still like to ask one question to Rokas Masiulis. Now that we're talking about ambitious plans for decades to come, large-scale energy exports from Lithuania. So quite obviously that with the decrease of the fossil fuels, there will be a higher demand for electricity, given the fact that we will have more electric cars on the streets. So how will the overall electricity market have to change, or the electricity sector will have to change in order to adapt to these changes? Every system evolves along with the technological development. And if we take a retrospective view 20 or even 10 years ago, when everybody was believing that renewables could be just as an addition to another source of energy, because the wind is not always blowing, the sun is not always shining. These were that was the arguments used in the past. Now, the public opinion has changed. Renewables, from today's perspective, renewables are to form the basis for our energy supply, and then other technologies are going to be used in addition. So there is a completely reversal of the overall understanding. Somebody say that we will overproduce. We have surplus production of, let's say, solar power. And of course, it is such thing is too good to be thrown away. It can be converted into electricity or power. It can be converted power to gas, for instance, into hydrogen, in methanol, ethanol, you name it, from the very same electricity. And you can use it in many ways. So we are not even aware of all the opportunities that the future beholds for us. And I fully agree with the fact that Lithuania, by the way, had nowhere to go. Since we were forced, we made to decommission our nuclear power plants. We had to look for the ways out. Latvians and Estonians are much better placed. They have either shale gas or the other options. We have Latvia has hydro power plants. We have some incinerators of waste, but these are not on the same scale. And therefore, Lithuania was among the first in Europe. And I'm afraid to ask that we are the first, but at least we allow connecting into the same grid the same number of solar and wind. We made an analysis that in Lithuania there is a mismatch between solar and wind. There is a 5%, so 100 megawatt line that can accept 100 of solar and 100 of wind. Whereas overall in the world, there is only one type of energy source that is being accepted by the grid. And in that respect, we are much more ahead than others. But again, this achievement was due to our inevitability. We basically had no choice. We had to be ambitious, and now we have to make further steps ahead. We have to think what we shall do about this electricity being generated in Lithuania. Or, alternatively, we should start thinking about storage facilities of the surplus electricity, and RRF is going to help us that. Without storage facilities, we are not going to deal with all those fluctuations in the renewable generations. And this is what we see in Latvia and Estonia. There is much higher focus on energy storage facilities. So I think that is our next forward. That would be storage batteries or some sort of systems similar to the ones used in Kruonio hydropower plant. Yes, indeed, but we do need to have the necessary natural conditions to make this technology viable. It is not so easy, by the way, to find a similar location. The likes of Kruonis, Estonians are also analyzing this technology. Anything that could store energy is going to have the future. I'm going to raise a couple of questions taken from the Slido app. I would like to remind you once again, slide.do, hashtag RRF, and you can either raise your own individual question or rank the questions which are already inputted by other listeners.
Will the CO2 capture technologies be supported? And Minister, could you please answer to this question first? Well, we have the financing sources, the Just Transition Fund, for example, where the majority of funds are allocated for industry decarbonization, etc. So we have measures for that. In the Next Gen Lithuania plan, from the billion allocated to the business, one of the areas is industry decarbonization in the form of loans. That is quite attractive. The businesses are quite active using this opportunity. Today, we have applications amounting to 1.5 billion euro already. This is a record measure, and businesses are really taking interest because the changes are inevitable. Mrs. Gower, would you like to add something?
Yes. Thank you. I think it's not only about investment and helping de-risking these investments and financing them. It's also very much about the business conditions for those investments and the permitting rules. I think one other important element in the Lithuanian plan is this breakthrough package, as we call it. So this very strong reform of the permitting procedures, because it's very nice to want to connect renewables to the grid. If it takes too long to build them and roll them out, then it's depriving a bit the purpose of the whole exercise. So I think that combination of the reform of the regulatory package and of the support to investment, private investment as much as possible, and then de-risking by the public intervention is something extremely positive. And just a side remark on comparing Lithuania with others. Lithuania is doing well in that respect, but it's not the greenest of the plan either. So we have 37% roughly of the amount of the plan dedicated to green. In some countries, you go above 55, 60% of the green transition being funded by the plan. So it is a shared priority to have this decarbonization, more energy independence, and more renewables in the grid overall in Europe. So Lithuania is well in the main trend in this respect.
Populiariausias klausimas dabar, ar finansų ministrė turi planą, kaip elgtis dėl tikėtinų sankcijų, baudų iš Europos komisijos dėl nepasiektų reguliacinių rodiklių?
Vienas iš mano mylimiausių turbūt klausimų, dažnai jo sulaukiu. Nepaisant to, kad yra tikrai populiarus klausimas, aš sakyčiau, kad yra daug mitų susijusių su šiuo klausimu. Nes pirmiausia, turbūt naujos kartos Lietuva plane yra mokestinių rodiklių keletas ir jie susiję su atskirom skirtingom sritim.
Indicators. They are related to several areas, for example, green taxes, taxation of real estate, and tax system review. And one of the indicators raises questions to the European Commission, not all of them. And those indicators could be categorized in two groups. One is legal acts discussed in the Parliament, and one of the indicators is related to this. And there are questions about the draft laws that have been presented to the Parliament, and it is related with the tax incentive review. This indicator raises questions in the European Commission. People say that it's been achieved in 50%, but I believe that we have achieved it by 100%. And now we have asked the court to say who is in the right, the European Commission or we, because this indicator in the Next Gen Lithuania plan has been copied from the government plan. I had a deadline, I put it in the plan, and I feel that I have implemented it as it has been formulated there. So the court will give us the answer whether the abstract formulation in the Next Gen Lithuania plan and the government program corresponds to what has been done or not. And currently we are talking about 8.7 million euros when the overall value of the plan is 3.8 billion. So despite of the fact that sometimes one little thing can spoil everything, but I believe that now we are just nitpicking. And I believe that in the overall context this is just a small detail. Ms. Gauer, maybe you'd like to add something, and then we can vote who is in the right and who is in the wrong.
Thanks a lot. Well, I think there's one thing where we agree is that it is a small thing in the overall payments. Where we may not agree is that it's a very important reform. I think that the reform of the taxation system in Lithuania, which is excessively complex, not prone to foster equality, and not sufficiently protective of growth, I think has been a recommendation from the Council to Lithuania for almost a decade. So it was a very, very important point in the plan. The first milestone that has not been met in our view, and that's been a final decision from the Commission, related to the proposal to be made by the government to the Parliament. But where I think we should all focus, the Lithuanian authorities and us, is about the next step. Because the proposal is just the first small step leading to a small suspension. But then what really matters is the final reform that will be adopted by the Parliament, and which we will have to comply with the objectives set in the plan. So I think cooperative work between the authorities and us is really what we're trying to do now, to have this important reform carried out in a way that will actually change the economic situation for Lithuania. And that's where we should look towards the future rather than looking back to the past.
The tax reform is very important in RRF, but maybe not that much to this discussion, because we are focusing now on energy. And I would not like to start a and open up another big topic. Question to Mr. Karazinas. In your opinion, what is lacking in the current system in order to boost the green transition even more? What would be your suggestions? How could we motivate even more businesses to turn greener? Well, as I said, the efforts should be focused on reducing the investment risks. And here we have twofold risks. On the one hand, we have objective risks, for example, high interest rates, geopolitical threats that maybe scare someone off, system throughput, technical throughput of the grid. And on the other hand, we have subjective risks when everything boils down to legal regulation. So the businesses must be aware that the policy is coherent and long-term, that it is clear that there are not going to be any sudden changes. The more clarity there is, the more attractive investments become. And of course, there is always room for improvement. For example, in terms of communication, maybe we should raise the awareness of the investors more about where we are going, how we are going there, why the investments are going to be safe. We have to increase trust. By telling and sharing our plans, we are increasing this trust. We also notice and get a lot of feedback on the fact that often form prevails over content, because the financing programs are very complicated, and even the institutions themselves don't agree what should be the interpretation. And here, we often see cases when you miss the deadline by one day, or you put a comma in a wrong place, or if you register your wife somewhere and suddenly you don't comply with the rules and you lose financing. So this does not help to increase trust, and then there is a lot of disappointment, and this disappointment is spreading by word of mouth. So we should also ensure better cooperation with the market, also listening into the feedback. What institution are you talking about? Do you mean the Invega or the Ministry of Finance? Well, mostly the Ministry of Energy. We would have many suggestions to the Ministry of Energy how to inform market participants better and how to set clearer rules. Yes, these rules have to be coherent, they have to be continuous, they shouldn't change too often, and they of course have to be clear. Am I eligible or am I not eligible? Mr. Masiulis, we are talking about green energy generation, but the previous speaker spoke about the grid potential, about the fact that the 100% annual growth will result in the issues with the grid throughput. How could we finance the relevant projects to help this? How are you drawing up future plans for the development of the grid? The grid that we have is sufficient. Yes, we need some investments, but these amounts are not significant. There are no big problems with the throughputs. And, well, of course, there are certain areas where there are problems. mostly related with the land, but in terms of the entire Lithuania, we have sufficient throughput. Yes, there are the best areas to develop wind energy, where we could build new lines and connect even more to the grid. But in fact, we have inherited a large and powerful grid that was built for much bigger energy consumption that we have now. We are thinking in two categories: consumption and export. For example, if Lithuania produces enough for itself, it has to put the electricity somewhere. So we have a line with Latvia, Poland, and Sweden. These are the directions that we could send our electricity to. So the next step is new lines. We are beginning our discussions with Germany about the potential construction of a cable to Germany. Today, our people are in Berlin and talking about this. So, one, developing export possibilities, but I believe that consumption is more important to the future of the state. So we must develop the industry areas that are energy intensive. And as soon as developers see that there is consumption in Lithuania, they will have motivation to continue developing renewable energy. In other words, to export not energy but the goods, which have higher added value. Yes, this is our priority. Of course, it's not bad to export electricity, but also, as I said, we have to talk about batteries. For example, several days ago, when there was a lot of sunshine, during the daytime, solar panels were starting to switch off because there was a surplus of electricity and the price could go down into the minus. So in Lithuania, we already see the phenomenon that is common in many states, that when there is sunshine, electricity is no longer needed, and storage facilities would help even out this graph. They would accumulate during the daytime, and in the evening, when electricity prices grow, that would be helpful. Probably many of us still have the payment schemes of day and night electricity. Previously, the day electricity was expensive, and the night one was expensive, and now vice versa. So, Mr. So what, in your opinion, is Mr. Masiulis's message? While we haven't solved the storage issue, we have to stop the investments into renewable energy. Well, I'm joking, of course. But this could be one of the conclusions. Well, I believe that everything has to be developing in parallel. Similarly with the electromobiles, we have to promote the charging infrastructure development as well. So we are working for this. I remember that now we have over a gigawatt of permits to develop storage facilities. If I'm right, if I'm not mistaken, 850 megawatts and 400 the most recent applications. And these are only for storage parks. Yes. I think that this should ensure balanced growth. Let us turn to the questions from the audience. Another question. The success of the green transition depends on the transition of the big companies. What are they doing, for example, Orlen, to green energy, to make energy greener? Minister, could you please elaborate on this?
I think whether we are talking about the large companies such Orlen or Akima, decarbonization is indeed quite very much investment-intensive activity, and for them to take this on board, they do need financial support. And the Just Transition Fund in Lithuania is meant exactly for that purpose, to help huge huge businesses for which decarbonization poses a serious challenge. Decarbonization is linked to many processes. If you decide to phase out the gas, you have to use alternatives, and then you have to ensure a high electricity supply. So this is quite a complex scenario involving all the companies, as well as including those which are going through decarbonization, such as Orlen or Akima fertilizer manufacturing, so that we could have a replaceability options, and that could be economically viable. So if you phase out gas and you choose other sources, it has to be worthwhile, be it the fossil fuel replacement with somebody else. So it has to be economically viable, because if our energy costs are going to be much higher, what is the benefit of it all? It has to be beneficial not only to our environment, to our nature, by way of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. It has to be beneficial also to businesses. So we have to take a very complex viewpoint, and the large companies have their own goals of how to go through this decarbonization process in a much smoother way, but it's a long road due to its complexity and due to the costs involved. So how could the fund, the Just Transition or RRF fund, could contribute to that? I heard that there could be Akima company in Jonava could move to hydrogen, and then it could transform itself into becoming a hydrogen manufacturer, and then it could have a hydrogen pipeline leading to Jonava. But of course, that would be very much highly investment-intensive initiative. And of course, one of such possibilities would be to use 1 billion to businesses facility. And that would be the next step. Payback, or the economically, if the investments made by private businesses pay off, then they're going to be made. And the regulation processes contribute to that, because some preparatory arrangements have to be put in place, and this breakthrough package illustrated very well to what extent the regulatory changes are important to achieve the results. Money is important. Nobody is questioning that. But of course, sometimes you have also to the fund. You have to, to have ideas where to put that money into. Also, you have to put all the regulatory changes in place, and then once the framework is good, if the payback is good, then the investments will pour, both from public and private investors. Everything is taking place in stages involving cooperation of all the stake parties, and in order to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions, we do need huge investments, and we are reviewing our needs assessments, how much investments we may need from the private or public sectors. Now we are updating these forecasts. So this overall green transition, we would require 31 billion euros, indeed, quite a substantial amount, given the fact that today Next Gen Lithuania budget is only 3.8 billion euros. So it is quite obvious that private businesses will also have to contribute, but to make them to contribute, they have to be profitable. Anybody wants
fully
to
agree about
comment?
the importance of helping business to decarbonize, because of course they tend to take a relatively short-term perspective, and right now it may still be more profitable than to continue running on gas than to try and decarbonize and turn to hydrogen. But two elements are important. First, the regulatory environment is such at the European level that they will have to decarbonize, because otherwise there will come a point where they will no longer be profitable, and anticipating that element is extremely important to keep them competitive and to ensure that they will remain on the market. And second, this is also what other member states do. If you look across the other plans, you will find in almost all the other member states very ambitious measures for the decarbonization at all scales. Decarbonization of big companies, if you look at Slovakia or France, but also decarbonization of SMEs, and that starts from their transport and that goes into their industrial processes. So I think that these are really things that Lithuania should not miss, and that this 1 billion for business might be the right tool, but there might be also more needs to ensure that we are not waking up in a couple of years' time realizing that they've missed the train. I think it's a really important one to take. Thank you.
Pone Masiuli, čia daug sluoksnių šitame
Mr.
klausime
Masiulis,
ir jeigu
indeed,
kalbam,
this is a multi-layered question now that we started talking about the large companies or corporations such as Orlen or Akima. We do understand that it is not only the energy security issue, but also the regional security involved, because these large companies have a direct impact on the quality of life, and they mean the livelihoods of many regional residents is dependent on such huge companies. Lithuania has inherited a very huge and enormous infrastructure from the Soviet times, and it is plays into the hands of some of the industries. Whereas, for instance, in Jonava, there are some infrastructure very much close to each other. So when could we expect such large-scale decarbonization projects to be put in place in order to decarbonize such big companies as Akima Fertilizer Company. When it comes to Akima Fertilizer Company or Electrine, I think that sooner or later we're going to do it. By 2030 it would be Orlen or Akima will have made the investments into hydrogen, of course by using some incentives, some soft loans, etc. What is important and that I would like to stress, and considering that there is a joint event with the European Commission, I would like to stress one important thing, and that is that the Baltic or Nordic countries, including Finland and Sweden, we have a lot of sea and a huge empty or unoccupied territories, and we're very much well placed to produce hydrogen or any other renewables, because we're not the high consumers. The high consumers are in Germany or in the Netherlands. So whenever we talk to Germans, and Germans say we do need to get this electricity from you, we do need, and then we calculate the cost of the project, and these costs are too huge for us. We cannot ask our consumers to pay for the big ones, because we're not the ones who are going to consume the most of the electricity. So the Nordics could indeed feed electricity the more populated European countries, but without the European help, without financial mechanism, which would incentivize the smaller countries to invest, then Europe is going to miss out on this possibility. There is no vacant or free land for renewables to produce as much as it may require. And the Germans are very clear about it. We will remain to be net importers. And we, I believe, we will continue to be exporters. But there is no bridge in between, and we have to make it happen. Be it a hydrogen pipeline, be it the electricity grid, all those major cables or grids, all those technologies. We used to talk about 600 or 700 megawatts. Now we're talking about 2 gigabyte technologies. Can you imagine one cable of 2 gigabytes when Lithuania only consumes 2.3 gigabytes? So one single cable from Germany could take all the quantity used by Lithuania. So we're indeed very small countries. And without the help of Europe, we simply do not implement the projects. Ms. Agao, could you please continue, pick up on what has been said?
And this is a very good example where the challenge is simply too big for one country alone, and where you need cross-border projects, investment and support, and for the internal market to work, and for the best optimization to take place in Europe. So there are European funding, as you know well, the Connecting Europe facility in particular, that are available to finance this cross-border grid project, but also in the future the cross-border hydrogen project. But the key question will be then how much money will be in those funds, and we will be coming very soon to the discussion of the next multi-annual financial framework, and that will be the moment where all of these important calls for common EU spending, for common EU investment projects to be reflected in the amount of the budget that will be available for this.
So in other words, I'm referring to Minister of Finance, investments into renewables, and picking up on what Masiulis mentioned, we have to realize not only as being made in the interest not of Lithuania alone, but also in the interest of other EU member states. It would be much more effective use of the production of wind power due to the low depths of the Baltic Sea, namely 2 or 3 times smaller depths, and then we can get a much better wind generation in the Baltic Sea. And that is one of the objectives for the current incumbent government or the upcoming governments, to make sure that investments into renewables it's a joint project. It's a joint in the joint interest, and there is an interest to invest more than Lithuania needs on its own. Yes, indeed, and there is nothing new in it. The large infrastructure is being co-financed by the European Union, such as large-scale projects, as Rail Baltica railway project, as well as others, which are connecting a number of member states, like on a cross-border principle. Renewables would also be part of such cross-border projects, and some of those networks or grids have already been inherited from the past, and we see that these joint efforts of sharing surplus energy in between the member states would work wonders. And this is what the pandemic, COVID pandemic, showed us, that without this sharing of surpluses, we would have had much higher energy prices, and therefore having a much more broader vision how we could boost renewables and how to ensure a better benefit for Europe on the whole. That is our next stage ambition, and this is one of the major objectives of the European Commission, at least in the energy field, is to look for the ways of funding of development of renewables, to make sure that these ambitious goals are achieved not only in figures but also in reality, so as to enable those cost-effective processes. And Lithuania is well placed to offer such projects which would be beneficial for Lithuania and for member states. Ms. Gaur, how you would comment?
Thank you. I'd like to bring another element to the discussion that we haven't touched yet. I think it's energy efficiency. Because we talk about producing more, transporting more, and that's indeed important. But energy efficiency is also absolutely critical, and the building stock of Lithuania, both public and private, is not particularly good in terms of energy efficiency. There are very significant investment as part of the plan, but also more generally into that sector, and that is absolutely essential also to fight against energy poverty, which is much higher although decreasing, but still much higher in Lithuania than the rest of the EU. So I think one element that we should not forget while talking about the transition and the investment in renewables, the two are complementary and should both take place.
Of course, that is a very important topic, but now that we're accelerating this discussion, where we're talking about not 2030 but 2035, most probably some of the questions are going to be tackled. Okay, let us change the direction now, and moving into another direction with our questions. How come that large livestock farms do not have biomethane or biomethane plants? What is the reason?
praplėsti šią temą.
I think that we could expand on this topic if we're talking about being environmentally friendly. Minister, what would you say? Well, I think that we would at least need the Minister of Agriculture or Energy to respond to that question, because I'm the one who is prioritizing the areas and trying to distribute the allocations for the best results. But when it comes to the details, I think that at least somebody from these two before mentioned ministries should be invited to answer that question. Mr. Masiulis, could you please comment on that? No, that would be the biogas sector, which I'm not dealing with, and I cannot comment on that. Another question.
Galima būtų turbūt ginčytis dėl formuluotės.
Well, when it comes to wording, we could agree or disagree with that, but I think how come and why do we absorb only 35% of all the investments? So why we're lagging behind so much? Because this plan is very much linked to the reforms, and the Millennium School programs is linked to the decisions on how this school networks or how the classes are being formed. And once the foundations are there, can you expect success of multifold success? So 3/4 of all these important decisions have been made, including the millennial schools and this breakthrough package, without which any investments made would not be as ensure such a good success. There is no point in investing into an empty school. Yes, you're right. So first of all, you have to make the necessary reforms. They may be not that comfortable, but they're necessary. And only after the reforms you make the investments. 95% of all the plan has already been, applications have been received, and 84% already have concluded the contracts on the basis of the updated plan. So I think that these investments are going to be put on the right foundations, and that would be a right approach rather than pouring the money without having any serious basis. Ms. Bauer, how would you comment?
Thanks a lot. 2 points. First, indeed, the specificity of this instrument is a combination of reform and investment. And for the countries that are more advanced than Lithuania in the implementation, what we see is that it is extremely beneficial. Because as you just said, I think you need to know where to invest. So you need to have a proper school map, health map, hospital maps, judicial map for other countries that also do have that before you put the money into the investments. So this combination of reform and investment is very useful. And in most plans, we had a front loading of the reforms precisely for that, because you have to start reforming and then you can make the most of the investments. So it is a good thing, and it should indeed be accelerated. The second point is on the figure. You said 33%. Yes, that's the amount of funding that has been received. But the figure that is the relevant one for the progress is 17%, which is the amount of milestones and targets of objectives in the plan that have been reached. And it is still quite little. So we urgently need to accelerate the rollout of the plan, and the payment request, as was mentioned by the minister in her introduction, most of them still remains to be made. If you look at the payment request made by most of the other member states, I think some are already at the sixth payment request, that's the case for Italy, some at the fifth one, that's for Croatia, and your neighbors have already finalized the second payment request and are preparing the third. So yes, Lithuania is doing well. It has an important plan to roll out. It is implementing the investments, but now the payment requests have to accelerate and have to come, because they are also the moment where we really see whether things have been done or not fully. So it's a sense of urgency that I would like to convey here, knowing that in 2026, as was recalled, this is the end of it. And any measure that has not been fully implemented by then simply will lead to lost funding for the country. And as we discussed before, the country needs the funding, so it would be a pity. Thank you.
Ministre.
First of all, I'd like to disagree with many aspects, because when countries were drafting their plans and were organizing their indicators, they did not know how the milestones would be evaluated, how the payments would be made, how the sanctions would be imposed. The rules and methodologies were approved 2 years after the approval of the plan. Had I known things I know today, I I wouldn't have been as brave, and all the indicators would have been included in one payment application, and we would have implemented all the plans. We distributed our decisions based on the logical manner, depending on the Parliament's work, and when those milestones were distributed throughout all the payment applications, now we are arguing with the Commission on whether what's been submitted to the Parliament is ambitious enough. In the second application is the decision-making in the Parliament. Well, if political debates are stalling, I cannot report an account for all the other indicators that Lithuania has achieved. So the progress is considerable. It's just that because of the methodology, I cannot ask for money for things that have been implemented. Because can I say today that the Parliament today is able to approve the tax package? Of course not. Let us wait for the election and we'll see what the ambitions are going to be later on. Any plan has to be a living one, and if we have a living document that reflects the discussions in society, it's quite natural that we have to look for a broad agreement. We cannot set our commitments in stone, even when they are interpreted slightly differently. So many countries are experiencing difficulties with applications. Some countries are doing better, some worse. There are countries that haven't submitted any applications yet because they are in the same situation as Lithuania. So we are doing our work, the reforms are ongoing, investments are being made, and we will account for all of that when we can, according to the methodology established. Ms. Gauer, you would surely want to supplement.
I think I don't want to be too polemic on this one, and I would still like to recall that the cooperation overall is going well. This being said, the rules were the same for everyone, including for the other countries. The Lithuanian plan is a good plan, has important reforms that were corresponding to the important challenges that the country has, as is the case for all of the other countries. And indeed, we have two countries who haven't yet submitted a payment request. That's Hungary, for reasons that everyone will understand. And Sweden just simply started late because the challenge, I think here we're talking of 5% of GDP for Lithuania. It's much less for Sweden, for which it was obviously not the same amount of priority. So I think it is challenging, indeed, because for the first time we have an instrument that basically requires from the member states to do what they promise to do. And it is very difficult, and yes, political discussions are always very, very difficult, so it's not an easy thing. No one ever said it was, but it's also commensurate to the amount of support that is being offered. And the same applies to everyone. Thank you.
Mes turbūt nepradėsime diskusijos, kiek
we are not going to start the discussion on how good it is to be allies with Hungary in the present-day Europe. But okay, let us turn to other questions. I have a good question. What are the measures that will help us achieve transport greening? Because currently in Lithuania, oil product consumption is growing. Minister, please, we'll start with you. Well, this is one of the problematic areas where even with the measures planned, we see that the indicators foreseen for this sector most likely will not be achieved. But in general, greenhouse gas emissions should be reduced according to the plans of Lithuania because other measures in other sectors are working. So in the transport sector, we have to talk about the development of types of fuels produced from fossil fuels. We also promote non-polluting fuels by purchasing non-polluting vehicles, be it individual or public transport means, and the procurement foreseen is quite big, but all of this has to be implemented in synergy with charging infrastructure development. At the moment, it seems that the question who was first, the chicken or the egg, is still relevant in this sector because
kokio norėtųsi, bet
the progress in the area of charging stations development is not very satisfactory. But we have competition in this sector, Ignitis and other players. Yes, but I would like to see more individual charging stations. We have financing for this, but this has to go hand in hand. We have to develop transport sector and infrastructure.
Įrenginėjamos iš naujos kartos Lietuva planą. Tai sakyčiau, kad viskas žingsnis po žingsnio, bet kad tai yra sudėtingi procesai, kurie nejuda taip greitai, kaip norėtųsi,
and they don't happen as fast as we'd like them to. Mr. Masiulis, what about the competition aspect? Well, I disagree with your comment, because currently this is not a profitable business. When there was a boom of electric vehicles in the world, everybody was keen on getting one, but now it's been slowing down. In the US, the situation is not very good. They all say that we don't have where to charge our electric vehicles. I still remember when I was working in the Ministry of Communication, we were discussing, should we subsidize the purchasing of electric vehicles or should we subsidize charging stations? Of course, there are too few of them. We need many more. Also, there are problems with connecting them to the electricity grid. How much should the state contribute to this? Well, I don't know. I don't work in this sector anymore. The situation is similar globally. Everybody wants more charging stations, but I'm myself driving an electric vehicle and I see what's the situation with infrastructure. The charging stations are 150 kilowatts each in the highway between Vilnius and Klaipėda. The development is really happening, it's obvious, but it's still not enough. It's not enough. Ms. Gar?
Thanks. I think that's also a very important part of the plan, and the different elements are included in there. So you have financing for the charging station, you have financing for public transport, which is incredibly underdeveloped in Lithuania. I think that's the lowest share of use of public transport. So you have public clean buses, you have electrification of railway, and then you have, of course, support to individual e-vehicle. There, I think the minister was saying earlier, we need to have a living document, and that's the point where we would agree. If some of the measures are not sufficiently successful because there's a lack of demand, either for the charging station or for the e-vehicle, for example, it might simply be that the design of the measure can be restored, or that some improvement can be made, and there we will be working very closely with the authorities to try and make sure that the incentives that can be provided by the plan are taken up and are allowing to reach the targets or to reach revised target if a higher level of support, for example, is required to ensure that there is uptake. But what really matters is that the direction is taken, and that both the charging infrastructure and the multiplication of those vehicles on the roads is happening. Thank you.
We are running out of time for this discussion. We have touched upon many important topics. Thank you for your questions. Let me once again introduce the panelists. Minister of Finance Gintarė Skaistė, the Director General of the European Commission Recovery Task Force, Celine Gauer, the President of the Lithuanian Solar Energy Association, Andrius Garazinas, and the Head of Litgrid, Rokas Masiulis. And now we have a half-an-hour coffee break. Let us come back after for the next important discussion about the supporting of businesses in the transition to higher added value.
Taigi, sveikinu sugrįžus visus po
welcome back,
pertraukos ir
everybody,
antroji
after the
mūsų
break.
konferencijos
Now we're
diskusija
starting our
parama
second
verslams
panel
pereinant prie
discussion with the
aukštesnės
topic
pridėtinės
supporting
vertės
businesses in the
ir
transition
džiaugiuosi
to high
galėdamas
added value.
pristatyti
And I'm
mūsų
very happy
diskusijos
to
dalyvius.
welcome
Tai
the
Europos
panelists to come onto the
komisijos
stage.
ekonomikos ir finansų reikalų generalinio direktorato direktorius
Director
Jakob
from
Wegener
DG Economic
Fries.
and Financial Affairs of the
Prašau
European
užimti
Commission,
vietą.
Mr. Jakob Wegener Fries.
Taip
Please
pat
come
norėčiau
to the
pakviesti į
stage.
sceną
I would also
Invega
like to
generalinį
invite
direktorių Dainių
Director General
Vilčinską,
of Invega, Mr. Dainius Vilčinskas,
Lietuvos pramonininkų konfederacijos
President of the Lithuanian
prezidentą
Confederation
Vidmantą
of
Janulevičių
Industrialists, Mr. Vidmantas
ir
Janulevičius,
Northway Biotech įmonių grupės generalinį
and the
direktorių
Managing Director of
profesorių Vladą
Northway
Algirdą
Biotech
Bumelį.
Group, Professor Vladas Algirdas Bumelis.
Aš taip pat noriu paprašyti visų
would
toliau
also,
užduoti klausimus,
like to
kurie
remind
jums
everybody of you that you have the possibility
rūpi
of
temoje
asking
parama
your
verslams
questions on the
pereinant prie
Slido app
aukštesnės pridėtinės
and choose the
vertės
section,
programėlėje
the discussion supporting businesses in the transition to higher added value on the app
slido.rrf. Užduokite klausimą, kuris
#RRF,
jums rūpi ir šios
please, you
klausimus
can
aš užduosiu
input your
mūsų
question there, and
diskusijos
depending on which of the questions are going to be
dalyviams.
ranked, the
Taigi,
highest
ponia
they
Fries,
will be going to
pradėkime
be
nuo
raised
jūsų,
to the
kaip
panelists. Starting
ES
from you, Mr.
gaivinimo
Fries,
fondas
how
apskritai
the
prisideda
RRF
gerinant
funds of the
Lietuvos
EU
įmonių prieigą prie
contributes to
kapitalo.
the access to finances for Lithuanian businesses.
No, thanks a lot. We touched on it briefly in the first panel, but I think let me put this a little bit in a broader context. Moving up the, say, ladder of value added, I think can be boiled down essentially to a question of knowledge, finance, and markets. So there's no question that finance and access to finance is absolutely essential, whether you're looking at the individual company or you're looking at a specific sector, or you're looking at it for the economy as a whole. And on financing, it was mentioned that the 1 billion financial instrument is really a major part of the Lithuanian plan. And I can say, as the minister said, we were extremely happy when Lithuania came a bit more than a year ago and said, let's also try to tap in to the loan possibility under the RRF, so not only taking the grants, but also taking a loan. And let's use that loan to open up a facility that can really support some of these high value added industries. And there we're talking about a broad range of projects that are possible. So it can be energy efficiency in industry, it can be specific sectors that are looking for financing, it can be the defense that was mentioned. And which I think would be a novel way of combining both, say, the economic angle with the security policy angle for a country like Lithuania. And this is big. We're talking essentially 1 billion euro. That is, at least in my calculation, somewhere between 1 and 1.5% of GDP. So that is quite a substantial boost in terms of making financing available. As was said, 150 million of that put directly into Invega, because when Invega was established, we saw that your mandate really corresponds extremely well to what we want to do with the facility, which is about resilience and recovery and being a future-oriented economy. And then the 850 for this other instrument, which is based on lending to companies and to projects. And it can be lending only by you, or it can also be lending in cooperation with banks, and I hope you will say much more about that. So this is maybe the most concrete manifestation of what we do to strengthen the financing side. And then on top of that, because it cannot be reduced to financing at all, comes the other dimensions, really about knowledge, because if you move up the value-added ladder, you move into the knowledge economy, and we can come back to the many ways in which the plan is also helping in that respect. And then, of course, it is about the markets. And we can talk about the markets, we can talk about how you develop the product, you develop the innovation that eventually brings a product to the market. But about markets for now, I just want to go back to the fundamentals of the RRF, of this facility, which was also to preserve the integrity of the single market. So the Lithuanian economy is very dependent on the European single market. And in the middle of COVID, the European single market was threatened. There were barriers being put up, and member states that have much, much deeper pockets to pay state aid, they were also starting to pay state aid to the individual companies. And therefore, there was a need for a European initiative to avoid the fragmentation of our single market. And that was one of the outsprings of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and something that I think any small open economy benefits from. So finance, markets, and knowledge, we can come back to the other dimensions, but 1 billion.
Pone Vilčinskai,
Mr. Vilčinskas,
two
large directions that we have already talked about, green transition and higher added value businesses. And in these two areas, there are many internal priorities or internal criteria. So what are these? What are the business projects that you are most looking forward to and for which you could grant loans from RRF facility? These two directions, one of them would be renewables, focusing on renewables, and that is quite a homogeneous facility meant to finance solar and wind investments. And this facility is targeted to help prosumers to install the solar or wind manufacturing infrastructure, and we are looking forward to applications from such companies. We expect to get many more of them in the future. Do you mean the companies, so that the companies could invest into their own electricity generation capacities, you mean? Yes. If there is a company which has a high demand for electricity, and that is our target audience from which we would expect getting applications. And what are the advantages of this facility? Indeed, the conditions are very good. So to start with, the objective of this facility is to help enterprises to have the sufficient supply of electricity, as well as to have a clear price per electricity, which is going to be fixed. And that is very important for business planning. Solar, wind, or hybrid farms, indeed, could be up for investments with a very high investment intensity and with very good interest. And that is one facility. A second facility, the so-called 1 billion to businesses. The purpose, or the main purpose of this facility is to promote investments into a sustainable economy, in helping companies to transform themselves into greener, more sustainable, more viable, investing into circular economy, into innovations, into deep tech, into digitalization, etc. And looking from the Lithuanian perspective, we would like that the majority of these funds are allocated to innovative projects, including large businesses, so as to help Lithuanian companies to grow further in order to be able to produce high added value products, and in this way boosting Lithuanian exports. So that is the expectation, and all the companies which have projects which are in line or with greening, innovativeness, or green transition criteria, they are more than welcome to put up their applications on what would be the conditions of funding. And so we are looking for the applications. And the number of applications received so far indicates that this facility, and by the way, Yegelaitė is asking, what is the number? 40 applications for the time being, and it is growing by the week. And what is the overall amount claimed? For 1.3 billion euros. And that is quite indeed quite a huge figure, and it shows that Lithuanian companies are willing to invest, and they have projects in their pipeline, innovative, sustainable and viable projects. So unfortunately, we only have 1 billion euros available, and as you have already heard, we have received applications for 1.3 billion. But not all projects are good ones, we have to admit. We are at the stage of reviewing the economic viability and the level of risks involved of each individual project. And given the fact that Lithuania is going to borrow funds from the European Commission and will have to repay them at a certain point in 10 years' time, and this overall financial facility is for a minimum of 20 years. So all the loans are going to be again reinvested, and this is what we have calculated. So we are planning to borrow a total of more than 2 billion euros. So all these innovative projects which have to contribute to the exports are going to be to receive this funding, and we're planning to be active, and we expect that those traditional financing, financial money markets like banks are going to also to be joining us in this effort, and we might be looking into the co-financing possibilities or look for a spread of risks where Invega would take the larger share of the risks and the banks the lower. So we will see. Mr. Janulevičius, with the help of the RRF plan, there were indeed huge expectations. And what are your general impressions now that we are several years into the implementation? Do you believe RRF helps Lithuanian businesses to adapt? Of course, the plan itself is indeed helpful because all these money injections, they build the jobs, they build our future, and that is quite a successful example. But of course, when it comes, it takes time from the idea fruition until the implementation. In real terms, we have seen that quite a large number of funds have been contracted, but in real terms, not much of them still yet reach the Lithuanian economy. I represent the highest confederation, over 340,000 employees, and we account for 59% of the GDP of Lithuania. So that was roughly a joint project along with the European Commission, with the government, and with the Ministries of Finance, Energy, and Energy, as well as the President's office, because access to capital in Lithuania, according to the ECB, is one of the worst. Because the interest rate is higher in comparison, as well as access to finances, shows that within 10 days, 1 billion euros has simply been depleted with all the applications that have been received so far. You mean that these applications have been approved? No, they are still to be ranked, and this, but it simply illustrates what low level of access to capital is. We expected that this measure is, or this facility going to last at least for 6 months. There is a much higher demand than the supply. And apparently we are somewhere on the outskirts of the European Union. And we were one of the major initiators of these facilities. One of them after 2022, after the price hike. Let me remind you, the prices on the 16th of August, between the 4 or 6 p.m., the electricity price was €4 per 1 kilowatt hour. At that time, everybody decided to become energy experts, just as it is. Everybody is now the basketball expert or the defense expert, then we all became energy experts. So after such price hikes, it is impossible for the industry to evolve stable. And this is what the results showed us in 2023, because all the companies which used to supply the products, they assessed their risk related to energy prices, especially the manufacturing facilities. They are from 3 to 30%, and they increase the prices. And this is the economic low growth figure that can be explained by this. And therefore, we have to seek to be more resilient. We have to ensure stable electricity prices for 15 or 20 years, depending on the source of generation, and to forget about those 600 million. Well, 1 billion euro comes with some strings attached, and we do understand that these limitations are necessary. But when looking at the colleagues, I say that let us not make it too much into the red tape. Let us not kill the initiative. If we are too late in injecting this money into the national economy, the poorer the results are going to be. And the figures maybe do not look so good, especially in the second quarter. The German economy shrunk by 7% in the second quarter compared year on year with 2023. So French industry, 4.5% shrinkage. So the first quarter was very positive in France. What about Lithuania? We're still collecting data, by the way. And then we will think whether to make them public or not, right? Well, industry is contributing to deflating the prices because the prices for our products was being reduced by 0.3%, so less of the red tape, more injections, and now that I see the representatives from the European Commission, I think we have to think global. And we, being the members of the Eurozone, we have to be moving towards the single market, the financial market, so that access to finances is consistent, and also to the single energy market. If we make a comparison with the Nordic countries, we know that there are some repair works underway now. And there is Nord-Baltic grid repair works. And we see that, again, in the evenings, the price per electricity is 40 cents per kilowatt, and during the day it's zero, because we have a surplus solar or wind. So that is why the storage facilities for renewables is our key direction in the future. And what Mr. Karazinas said, we shall not stop making necessary investments, because somebody might start saying that we have surplus electricity. Well, to those skeptics, I would say that this is something temporary. If we want to grow, we want to have the energy costs consistent. Last day's price versus Sweden and Lithuania is the difference of 7 times. Finland versus Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, 6 times the difference, because there are some repair works in this Nord-Baltic grid. And then we cannot stay competitive, because electricity is one of the major elements in the price element. So the single energy market and the single access to the finance market, especially for the Eurozone members, there should be a level playing field for everybody. Unfortunately, Lithuania is not somewhere either towards in the middle, but we're still the most expensive. And then only Estonians are more expensive. And this is this inequality which we have to find the ways how to deal with. And these are the initiatives that we wanted to initiate. Mr. Fries will, of course, be able to reflect on that. But okay, let us make this first round of questions. And I would like to ask Professor Vladas Bumelis. You are one of the leaders of high added value businesses in Lithuania. And this opportunity that we're now discussing, it doesn't happen often. We may not expect it to happen. I mean, RRF support as well as additional possibility of taking loans, and that is the way of boosting Lithuanian competitiveness. And there are also several ways. There could be a number of applicants, each with a couple of millions, or instead only several recipients, beneficiaries who have enormous and huge investment needs, and who could then change the reality, the Lithuanian reality, by simply embarking on a very large-scale, ambitious project. From what you say, that only the large projects can contribute significantly to the Lithuanian economy boost. Could you please expand on that? Well, I would be very happy if, as you said, everybody turned into energy experts in 10 minutes, so now everybody would turn into biotechnologists. But this is probably not going to happen. And to say that only energy or biotechnologies will save Lithuania, well, it's not going to happen. We have to seek balance everywhere. And this should be a serious
national strategy. But in Lithuania, it is quite usual that we love strategies, we write a lot of them, and then very quickly we put them into the drawer and forget about them. And we don't want to continue implementing them. I like to use this concept of strategic discipline, but this strategic discipline is often lacking in Lithuania. And an example here is the sector of biotechnologies, because we had the program for the Lithuanian future by 2040, and everything was very nicely written there. And it was foreseen that by 2030, biotech should generate 5% of the Lithuanian GDP. 5% GDP from 70 billion, that would be 3.5 billion euros of generated value. Well, yes, Edmundas, you are very good in calculating. Yes, there are figures that have to be attained. And several small companies or several startups will not help us very much here. It's obvious that we are already lagging behind with the strategic discipline. And if we want to implement these figures, and the figures have been approved by the government and the parliament, then we need to think, what should we do? And we should invest, just like into the energy sector. We have to invest a lot of money into biotechnologies. Nobody is going to come here and build those factories just like that. So what we are talking about today, the 1 billion for the business, is one of the opportunities, one of the possibilities for us to implement the approved biotechnology program and to invest considerable funds into developing the biotechnology industry. We often speak about the Lithuanian life sciences. It's a popular topic. Everybody wants to be a scientist, but we're not very keen on becoming the representatives of the Lithuanian life science industry. And we're not developing this industry enough. For this, we need more accessibility to financing, to capital. And I believe that this program, 1 billion for business, is the only possibility to allocate considerable funds to develop the industry of life sciences. And this would indeed help us generate the 5 or 4 billion of added value. So, this is my vision, and I believe that this is the only possibility. Of course, just like in the energy sector, biotechnology sector, we have to speak about considerable funds. And there is another problem, and the European Commission should start thinking about this as well, that many products are made in the largest factory in the world, in China. And the relationship with China, both in terms of energy and biotechnology, is not getting better, but they are getting worse and worse, rather. Let me give you an example of the U.S. Currently, they are about to adopt a law that American companies will not have the right to engage in joint efforts and to produce in China. I'm speaking about the biotechnology sector here. And I believe that the EU also have to start developing the independence of biotechnology sector. Lithuania has a rather well-developed biotechnology sector, and it's quite innovative too. So I believe that this could become a direction not only for us, but for the EU. And in Lithuania, we could have a strong hub focused on biotechnologies and life science industry. So that would be my answer. Mr. Janlevčius, would you like to add something? Yes, I'd like to add on what Mr. Bumelis has said. We have to diversify risks. During the pandemic, we saw that the simple components that used to be produced in the EU now were being produced in China. And when the chains were disrupted during COVID, we saw that we simply were lacking aspirin and antibiotics, and especially with the start of the war in Ukraine. So I believe that having vertical chains fully in the EU, maybe not in full scale, but we must have those chains because this is about our survival. This is the key to our survival, be it about medicine, food or energy. These are the three things that are vitally important to people: health, energy, and we see that Ukraine would do nothing without it. And of course, food. So I fully agree with you, and we have to be much more responsible in the EU in these terms than before.
Kalbant apie kriterijus ir vertinimus, dedamosios turėtų būti ne vien tvarumas, rizikingumas, bet ir tam tikra prasme net ne nacionaliniai, bet ir ES interesai.
Interests, not only national, but EU interests. Yes, in principle.
Pirmoje vietoje Lietuvos prioritetai.
We are looking, of course, first of all, to the Lithuanian priorities. We are a national development agency, and we are closely cooperating with the European Investment Bank and Investment Fund, EBRD as well. So there is a lot of common ground, but we also have to focus on local needs and local projects. Yes, innovations and strategic goals are priorities when we evaluate applications and when we talk with the project office. Mr. Fries, would you like to reflect on what you've just heard?
Yeah, in a couple of respects, I mean, many things are being put on the table here now, but to take the bigger perspective, the three black swan events that we have been through, a war and a pandemic and an energy crisis, is clearly reflecting in the Commission policies in all the respects you are talking about. So it's clear the pandemic showed that in some respects we had not secured the resilience of the pharmaceutical sector in Europe. We were dependent on certain components that were no longer available during the pandemic. The energy crisis, absolute wake-up, which was discussed in the panel before. And I have to say that for the energy and the single market in energy, I think most people are quite impressed with how quickly we have been moving. All of us, in the individual member states, but also at the European level. So whether it comes to the regulation or whether it comes to the stability of the markets, the single market in energy has moved very quickly, also thanks to this facility, because we adapted it and we added the so-called repower with additional money. Now, is there more to be done? Absolutely, because the interconnectors for energy between different parts of Europe are still lagging behind in important respects. Like the national grid capacity is often lagging behind, the interconnectors are also lagging behind. And I totally concur that structurally, this is to Europe's competitive disadvantage. We have so much to offer, but when it comes to energy, we are currently at a competitive disadvantage. So of course, as we talked about, the energy efficiency and the introduction of renewables is going to become increasingly our strategic asset. And there it goes with a certain diversification. So I think it's also important, here in Lithuania, it is well known that it is a relatively resource-intensive economy. It is also an economy that, when it comes to the export base, is relatively dependent on a few sectors. and not necessarily those that are most future-oriented. No, they are relatively resource-intensive also, the minerals export, the transport sector. So there's certainly something more to do in terms of smart specialization. And smart specialization, I think now we don't have a government representative as such, even if Enrica is here, but this government's smart specialization strategy, as far as I understand, is concentrated on biotech and on IT and on the green and digital transition. So when it comes to the strategic development, a number of initiatives have been taken. So we have our Strategic Technologies for Europe platform, which has basically highlighted a number of particular technologies that we know are going to be important in the future, and where we need to be wary that we are not building up new dependencies as we had done it in the case of energy. And biotech is actually, or pharmaceuticals is actually one of those that has been highlighted. Now, how do we do that from Europe's side? I think there is a continuum here from working on resilience and working on what we call strategic autonomy to something that is a lot more interventionist and could be sort of bordering old-fashioned protectionism. So we need to be very, very careful where we place ourselves on that spectrum. But a number of tools have been put in place already, including by this commission. And I'm quite sure that the next commission, whenever it starts later this year, strategic autonomy or a modern industrial policy is, I think, surely going to be top of the agenda. From the business perspective, I think what was said is that there's a need to de-risk the supply chains, not to decouple. And we don't need, in all respects, to go the American way. We don't do that on the green transition. We make use of our emission trading system, we make use of subsidies, and we make use of regulation. In the US, they have chosen another way, which is to make use of tax credits. I'm not sure that the American way of doing it is superior in the long term, but it's very tangible, it's very visible, it gives a lot of certainty to companies. The same way, when it comes to strategic autonomy, you have this concept in the US, ABC, anything but China. Huh? That is decoupling. I don't think that is necessarily to the benefit of the European Union if we were to do that. We still, for a number of years, will have to rely on certain Chinese intermediary input, for example, to steer and progress in our energy independent. We are not yet there where we can fully run this on a European capacity. We want to get there. We have even set indicative targets of how much we want to produce of the different technologies within these key technologies. But it will take a decade or more to fully materialize on that. Now, that was long. I just want to put one issue on the table, which is, supply chains is also about digitalization. And I think if we talk about moving up the value-added ladder, the digital input to the service or to the product is absolutely essential. And it is something that I think the plan is also addressing in many ways, the Recovery and Resilience Plan in Lithuania. So digital is a part of the knowledge economy. And I don't think you are going to be resilient in a knowledge-based economy without also having, state-of-the-art digital input. And I want to point exactly to one project which is important in the plan, which is the one on cybersecurity. So you are, as businesses, geographically placed vulnerably. So if you want to be knowledge-based companies with a high degree of digital input, then there's also a need to be digitally secure. And there are projects in the RRP specifically on that. Thanks.
Dėkui, matau, kad Vidmantas Janulevičius nori reaguoti, turbūt dėl Amerikos politikos, kur čia dar, jeigu laimės Trumpas, tai tai, ką mes matom dabar, yra ko gero tik žiedeliai. Po to bus ir didesni vaisiai, jeigu jis laimės.
Aš gal tik ir sutikti ir oponuoti kolegai norėčiau šitoje vietoje, sutikti toje vietoje, kad galbūt tas tax credit sistema iš tikrųjų Amerikoje nėra labai tvariai. Pritariu šitoje vietoje konkretus gyvenintas
viable. And a specific project, if it is not linked to the turnover, linked to the something paid in taxes, then it is not viable. If you are dependent on the fact whether the people are going to dedicate a part of their revenues by way of investing in a certain area or not. So in that regard, I agree with you. $2 trillion have been allocated for this returning manufacturing back to US. So we will have to think something also if we want to have these verticals. You mean decisions will have to be made in the US. If we want to make an analog for Anti-Inflation Act, $2 trillion in the US and 850 billion euros in the EU. But of course, it's good to agree among ourselves, the member states, but we have to look forward into the future. And America, for the time being, is taking over the larger portion of our investments. And we may read the report by Mario Draghi or Rigoletto, and we see that the GDP in the US has grown within 6 years by 30% more than in the EU. So apparently something has to be done within the EU. Simply being dependent on somebody else is not the good option. And without China, we have no any other alternative in terms of the commodities. We have killed our own manufacturing just as US did on its own. So what to do, how to preserve our know-how, and if we move our know-how with all the manufacturing facilities into the third countries, which get higher subsidies with higher incentives, then in the longer run we are going to lose. And all the studies that have been made under the Horizon program, by the way, we're very proud of it. It is the largest. It's talking about 100 billion US from 110 to 112. So if we are not going to invest anything into the vertical manufacturing, then we're simply giving it as a present to some other countries. We're giving away the taxpayers' money. We have to implement from start to finish all our patented products, be it in the pharmacy, be it in the engineering or in other areas. We have to have our vertical production lines so that we know that our taxpayers' money has been used wisely, so that we can still keep our innovative thinkers here rather than developing and manufacturing somewhere cheaper. America has already understood this. Okay, let me go back to RRF. Professor, the question to you. You started developing the life sciences compound or the whole facility as such. Why all of a sudden you are looking into the RRF loan rather than the bank loan? Well, this idea of having a whole, like a campus, a biotechnological campus, that is an idea. And of course, the money is a lot, but what we are short of is the ideas. Oh. Whenever you have a good idea, then the money is there as well. But if you have a very substandard idea, then wherever you go and seek funding, be it the national bank or a private bank, then they say thank you, because this idea is good for nothing. So the idea itself has to be based on something. If it is based, if it is well substantiated, it shall not be put somewhere in the drawers to carry dust. It has to be put into practice. Be it be a city idea, that would be an idea of building a whole complex of life sciences and academia and everything, which could be made up of 3 parts. So the first part would be the companies which we already have fully operational, which are generating quite huge turnovers, 100 million euros per year, which according in our standards, it's quite a substantial amount, maybe not as much according to the European standards. And the second thing is we are planning to build a gene therapeutical center, and therapy is the future of the medical sciences, and we're using the RRF funds and the bank loans. And the banks must have seen trust in our idea. We're talking about not a very huge amount of money, 50 or 60 million euros in biotechnological field. This is not something substantial, because banks are not ready to expend huge amounts of money. And the third part of this BioCity idea, we already have the partners who already putting on the table their own investments, roughly 100 million euros in total. So in order to build this third part of the biotechnological city, we need 1 billion. So in order to build one manufacturing facility, we need from 100 to 600 million euros. So then we are talking about huge amounts of money. So how to collect them? Where to raise them? The banks are ready to contribute, but this idea of 1 billion euros to businesses, that is the only option for us, which we might expect to gain anytime soon within the coming 20 years, where state could also co-fund and take its share of risks. That these projects are going to generate future 5% of the GDP is indeed quite a huge an achievement. I think that these projects can do that. So while we believe that it would be worthwhile to support this project, because the €1 billion for businesses is a good facility for us. And by the way, it is not for free, it's a loan. We're talking about 140, 150 applicants. Everybody wants to take out a credit, but maybe not all of them are thinking that you will have to repay it back. These are not the grants which are given basically for free. We're talking about loans, which will have to be repaid. And you have to understand your business model very well, for which you are borrowing the funds. And that is why we are looking for the ways how to implement this project, not only through the traditional ways, through the RRF, but also by way of discussing and negotiating with the banks, because the RRF is not going to expand 500 or 600 million euros, but this maximum amount, which could be received from RRF, is still quite substantial. If you get partners, good partners, and then the banks are also willing to borrow you, to lend you the money, then you have a good syndicate of stakeholders, and then you can get a good access to funding. How to pool 1 billion euros in investment, it's quite a daunting task. And I think that this billion euros for businesses is indeed a nice facility, and I'm very happy. Mr. Fries, you wanted to add something?
No, I exactly wanted to get to the syndicated loans, because 1 billion, even if it is big, it is also limited for projects of your size. So I think the idea that Invega can go in, work with your company or another project like that, and banks, is clearly having this possibility of giving. But of course, what I wanted to say is it doesn't stop at the borders of Lithuania. When we are talking projects that size, of course, there are other European institutions and other European facilities that can also come in to play. So the European Investment Fund or the European Investment Bank, but also some of the facilities that we are having under what we call InvestEU, which is a bit of an umbrella for a broader set of financial instruments, not only loan-based, but also other types of instrument where you're blending, for example, equity with lending. So there's a whole set of options here. What I think is very important is to have a national promotional bank. So what we see very often with the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund is that they do a project screening that is recognized to be extremely strong. And the moment that they put their stamp of approval on that project, everything goes easier with the commercial banks, or in terms of issuing corporate bonds or even going to the stock markets and getting some equity. And there I would hope you are a relatively young institution, but it's important to have a national promotional bank that works with other national promotional banks and works with these overlayers at the European level. And then, of course, as I think you alluded to, of course we should build our capital market union, because I'm sure there are banking representatives here in the room, but banks somehow are not in many member states able to provide all kinds of financing. We need more equity financing in Europe. This is one of our competitive disadvantages. And equity means also to share the risk in another way. So that is an agenda, capital market union. It's a difficult one. It's not going to happen from this year to next. But again, one where I think the national efforts and the European level effort will come together.
Čia galim pratęsti šitą temą, man atrodo, palėtėm labai
I think
įdomų
we
momentą,
can
prašau.
continue with this topic, and Dainius, you would like to comment.
Kas su RRF yra išskirtinio,
So
kad
what is exceptional
pirmą kartą
with RRF
Lietuvoje
is that it is for the first time in Lithuania that
kad
Lithuania agreed with the European Commission that the funding is going to be allocated to large projects and large companies. Before that, Invega was mainly to boost SMEs. SMEs, of course, form the basis, the foundation of economy, and they are considered as the backbone of the economy. This time round, we are focusing on large projects, and the projects run by a professor, according to the national standards, is indeed an enormous one. Even if all the local banks joined the efforts and agreed to co-fund the projects, I would still don't believe that they will be able to fund it. Of course, European Investment Fund and European Investment Bank are important institutions. What Invega is doing at the moment, they are trying to carry out these functions, and the maximum transaction that we can fund would be 250 million euros per one beneficiary. And when it comes to the initiation and implementation of the projects, which may have looked like some dream, a rosy dream, unrealizable, now we are able to look into the economic viability of the project and decide whether to go ahead of it or not. The fact that we coordinated this possibility with the European Commission means that we can be more ambitious, and then we can make Lithuanian economy on an equal put it on an equal footing with other European economies. Another thing that Vidmantas mentioned, that Lithuanian businesses have limited access to finances and they pay higher interests. Why is it so? Because traditionally, in the past, all the banks were dominating the market, and therefore all the other alternatives, very lower value or underdeveloped, such as bonds market or the stock exchange options. They are, in a way, making the baby steps, and they do not have the required scope. What the Invega is doing at the moment, it is trying to bridge this gap between the traditional bank lending possibilities and the venture capital instruments. And we do expect that this 1 billion euros is going to act as a catalyst, which is going to boost and to encourage private investors to join in and to assume their fair share of risk. We can take a larger share of the risk, but we also be willing to encourage other potential investors to discover Lithuania and to discover Baltic states and to come and invest here. Lithuania is the country which may not look very attractive for foreign investors, and without the international investors, there are hardly any other investors willing to invest, be it the equity or into the lending instruments. And this is where the challenges lie. RRF, I do hope that it is not going to be a one-off facility, that something similar is going to be available in the future. They will help Lithuanian businesses to make an important step. Mr. Nenalandžius, you would like to boost. When it comes to the secondary market, and just as Dainius mentioned, he's absolutely right. It is very shallow. The national capital market is very shallow, and the interest rate are so high that it is hardly possible for any businesses to be willing to undertake this risk. very few banks and just one airlines issued bonds of 14% of profitability. And now we're talking about 12%, whereas the average, industrial average is from 5 to 6% of profitability. So something is wrong with our market. And what Danius mentioned is that we have to move forward and we have to attract the attention of the European Union, that we have to somehow even out this disbalance so that we could contribute with our own fair share to the overall development of the Europe. Let me remind you that within the past 20 years since our membership, the GDP in Lithuania has been growing the fastest. And if we take the entire period from 2004 to 2024, and it would be even much more faster if we had the real and true access to finances.
Just one sentence. The World Bank statistics, I just looked it up. So indeed, banks are trying to protect people's money, and we understand their conservative approach. But from 58% in 2010, according to the World Bank, in Lithuania, bank financing dropped down to 32%. This is official statistics. And if we see this drop, then it has to be covered somehow, since the market is shallow, a small market, so we have no choice but to look for money in Europe. Well, since according to the number of applications, RRF is successful. So along with the RRF money, we are looking for possibilities for financing from the budget or other sources to add 100 or 200 million in order to have the possibility to finance the lacking instruments. As I was listening to Professor Bumelis, I got a question. Let's imagine if, I hope that people there are much more competent than I am, but if I had to evaluate a genotherapy project and its potential risk, well, I'm sorry. Are there people in Lithuania who would be able to... Well, Vidmantas Janulevičius is producing solar technologies and batteries. Maybe I could understand something about that if I read up beforehand. But gene therapy, who would be able to evaluate the risk of this project, apart from yourself? Well, it's not true. We are not such big gurus.
Tie bankininkai, kur čia jeigu pasižiūrėsite poną Dainį, tai jis grynas bankininkas.
A born banker.
Ir jis kitoks nėra.
And that's all he is.
Privačiam banke,
whether he worked in a private bank or whether he now works in a state bank. So they are very smart. If they don't know something, they hire experts. And currently, everything is global. In the EU, we have 28 member states. So it's quite easy to find experts in this area. And they usually do just this. They carry out a global expertise analysis. If we are speaking about a Swedish bank, then they go to Sweden and ask there. So I don't see problems here. Any innovative idea can be evaluated by people either here or from anywhere else in the world. There are people in the world who understand this, who are experts. And in order for you all to understand about gene therapy, so we treat a consequence with medication. The gene therapy treats the cause and prevents the manifestation of a consequence. So everything is reversed. We have not been able to do this before. So this is the future for medicine, and nobody argues about that. And it's not a new thing. But if you want to evaluate a business plan or carry out an analysis, then there's no problem with that.
auditorija juokėsi, bet turėjo
Although
ir
the
antrą
audience was
dugną.
laughing, but
O
my
antras
question
dugnas yra
was
tas,
twofold.
kad RRF
So the
pinigai,
second
ko gero,
aspect
yra
of my
būdas
question was that RRF's money probably is a way to finance relatively riskier projects than the classical business projects. Isn't that so? Yes, indeed.
Ir papildant, jo, mes tikrai nesidam viską išmanantis.
We don't pretend to know everything. We do hire experts when necessary. But on the other hand, we are not naive, and we understand that there are going to be losses, and everybody has to be aware of this. Banks are happy that they don't have any credit losses now. That's fine. But if a bank doesn't have any credit losses, then that means that it assumes too little risk. It's good for the bank, but it's not good for the market. So we intend assuming more risk and probably will incur some losses. Not all projects are going to be successful, but we have foreseen this and we have made our calculations in all measures. And it's all right, even if because when the funds reach economy, they will continue working, they will be multiply. Mr. Fries, the last
I simply wanted
summary.
to add, because we're talking about projects now that are at an advanced stage where they are seeking financing. I just wanted to add to that discussion that the RF is also financing tomorrow's projects, because we are financing some of the ideas that eventually would be leading to new biotech products. So actually part of our trip here to Vilnius is to go to the Vilnius University Hospital to look into what they are doing under the RF, which is a project called 1+ Million Genome, which is part of a global project where hospitals and universities in Lithuania participate in mapping different genomes with the ultimate aim of being able to offer personalized biotech for rare diseases. So something which is, good for mankind, but eventually also could be good for business. And to generalize on that, I think when we start in Lithuania and we say, how will this member state move up the value-added ladder? Clearly, the cooperation between business, science, university, and public authority is something that we have pointed to for quite long as an area where one could improve. And some of these centers of excellence that I think you made reference to, that's exactly the idea, to try to bring everybody together so that one can launch research and development that is targeted to the market.
Dėkoju, mūsų laikas jau prieš kurį laiką baigėsi, bet kadangi matau daug klausimų dėl smulkaus ir vidutinio verslo finansavimo, tai tiesiog jūsų trumpa refleksija į tai, kaip RRF fondas ir paskolos gali prisidėti prie smulkaus ir vidutinio verslo projektų įgyvendinimo ir ar šita tema apskritai yra, bent jau kalbant apie RRF paskolą, uždara.
Is it closed? No, it hasn't been closed. SMEs can also submit applications. But while discussing with potential applicants, we always look into the whole array of INVEGA measures. There are quite many measures, previous measures meant for SMEs. So we have instruments for the small businesses, but now we are talking about RRF in order for companies to plan, to prepare projects and to apply, because this measure is for many years in the future. Whereas we have been working consistently with SMEs and cooperate with banks, we provide guarantees for these loans. So SMEs have many more alternatives than the large businesses. RRF is the first instrument meant for the large companies, and it's unique in the way that we're going to finance large companies. Ladies and gentlemen, let us thank the panelists, the Director of the DG Economic and Finance Affairs from European Commission, Jakob Wegener Fries,
Invegos generalinis direktorius Dainius Vilčinskas, Lietuvos pramonių konfederacijos prezidentas Vidmantas Janulevičius ir Northway Biotech įmonių grupės generalinis direktorius profesorius Vladas Algirdas Bumelis. Ačiū Jums, o metas dabar apskritai apibendrinti mūsų konferenciją ir po šios diskusijos kviečiu į sceną Celine Gauer, tai yra jau matyta Europos komisijos atstovė apibendrinimui. Mes galim likti.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and a few words to conclude, and my first word is, of course, to thank you. Well, thank the representation here of the Commission in Vilnius and the Lithuanian authorities for allowing us to be here together and to have this very interesting event. Thank the panelists, all of them, this panelist, but of course the panelists in the first panel as well, and our moderator for very interesting, deep, and animated discussion. Thank the Lithuanian authorities as a whole. I think all the colleagues with whom we have been working very intensively in the last 4 years. It's not always easy because this plan is extremely challenging, but it is always very, very cooperative. So my deep thanks to all of them. And many thanks to all of you for making the time to be there with us this morning, either here in the room or online. It is not, as was mentioned by the Minister at the beginning, it is not a plan just for the authorities. It is a plan for the country, it is a plan for Europe, and it is something that requires all stakeholders to play ball. It's not something that will simply be coming from the public sector to the economy. It's something that has to be driven by all players. Takeaways from today, difficult to sum up. A number of very positive elements I would take away. And the first one is that we have a shared understanding of the challenges that this plan is trying to address and that Lithuania is facing. And the first one that was abundantly discussed today was is the energy dependence and the need to decarbonize the economy. And here the plan is offering essentially one solution for both challenges, the rollout of renewable energy sources and of storage, the connection to the grid, and a more decarbonized economy. The second common challenge, I think, is the need for competitive and innovative business, the need for Lithuania to climb up the value-added ladder, as was just mentioned, and to move to more innovation in all possible sectors, from digital to health, for example. The third one remains taxation. That was not discussed, kind of the topic that we wouldn't discuss, but we still discussed a little bit. Taxation and social inclusion, the need to have more equality and more fairness in a society. The second positive takeaway is that we see progress on the ground, and there were many references to many different projects that show that things are happening and that implementation, although we don't see it yet in terms of payment request and funding, we see it happening on the ground. Investments implemented, also a number of reforms already voted by the parliament, and the introduction made by the minister was in that respect very positive and very encouraging. What we also saw as positive was the support to business and the very good functioning of Invega in providing better funding for riskier but necessary projects. And the boom of renewables, a boom that nobody would 5 years ago have expected to be of that magnitude and that speed, which I think for the overall region is an extremely good news. And all of this, and my third and last positive news, is making a difference for citizens, and for citizens in all aspects of their life. From their education, we didn't spend so much time on the Millennium School project that was briefly mentioned, but also the reform of high education, health with the renovation of emergency department of many hospitals, not only here in Vilnius or in Kaunas, but also in many other cities, to have quicker and better access to health for citizens. houses with the energy efficiency investment that we mentioned to keep people warm and to reduce even further the energy poverty that the country is experiencing. Mobility, clean mobility and better availability of public transport, but also work and training and improvement in skills and investment in these skill mismatches. So for citizens already, the implementation of this plan is showing benefit and is making progress. And that's the third very positive takeaway I would have for this morning. That's on a positive note. Still, of course, the number of areas of concern and points of attention. The first one being that Lithuania still is a bit behind other member states in the implementation of the plan. Things are happening, but are not yet fully finalized and evidenced. And as long as you don't see them evidenced, first you don't get the financing for them. But most importantly, you always have a bit of a doubt that this will be finalized. So important then to pick up on the submission of payment requests. Some investments are experiencing some difficulties. We heard a bit of doubts on the mobility investment, charging station, e-vehicles. And that calls really for an immediate action by the authorities and by the market players to try and find solutions. Because we still have time. We only have 2 years, but we still have time to fix issues, recalibrate, readjust this living document that the plan should be, as the Minister said earlier. And some reforms still not progressing and a political change to come later in this year. Which can be seen as a curse or an opportunity. Let's try to make sure that before the change of government, if there is one, and certainly after, we manage to catch up and finalize all the reforms that are still pending. All of this will require a lot of focus from everyone here, everyone in the authorities side, and very much everyone on our side as well, because as you heard several times today, the clock is ticking. 2026 is an absolute deadline, and we need to make sure collectively that we have finalized everything that is to be finalized to ensure that Lithuania doesn't leave any money on the table. I think that would be a waste and a pity. So that will again require a lot of cooperation. You can count on all our support and all our dedication. I think we are extremely committed to make this work for you and with you. So thank you very much for being there and being part of this project, and let's get back to work. Thank you.
Ačiū gerbiamai Celine Gauer, Europos komisijos ekonomikos gaivinimo ir atsparumo didinimo darbo grupės generaliniai direktoriai. Aš dar prašau visų sudaryti programėlę slido.ls ir įvertinti mūsų konferenciją, kaip vertinti tikiuosi. Jums buvo įdomu ir turininga, mano nuomonė, geriausia įmanoma diskusija.
And that was indeed, we had two very fruitful discussions whenever we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Lithuania's membership of the EU, when we focus on the future rather than the past. I think that each one of us has witnessed the change for the better in Lithuania, the change for the better in our regions, in our way, in our quality of life, in our possibilities for the businesses, for our youth, for students, for anybody. Everybody has benefited from those past 20 years of membership. And when it comes to the opportunities that are opening up for building a high value, added value products, and that is indeed exceptional. So thank you very much for being there, and have a nice rest of the day.